The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test felt like the beginning of my entire life. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from pure, heart-thumping joy. I was going to be a mother. I had to tell him. I had to see his face. But when I got home to surprise the man I loved, the man I was building a future with, I found him on a video call, laughing with his ex-girlfriend about how pathetic I was, and how he was just waiting to drain my bank account dry before disappearing forever. The world tilted on its axis in the sterile, fluorescent-lit bathroom of my office building. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, profound silence that had enveloped me. In my trembling hand, I held a small white plastic stick, and on its tiny screen were 2 stark, impossibly dark pink lines.
Pregnant.
The word echoed in the cavern of my mind, not as a question, but as a definitive, life-altering statement. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I braced myself against the cool tile of the stall door, a slow smile spreading across my lips. Me and Bradley, a family. We had been together for what felt like a lifetime, 3 years that had been a whirlwind of shared dreams, inside jokes, and the comfortable rhythm of a life intertwined. We hadn't been actively trying, not with the precision of charts and thermometers, but the conversation had been there, a soft, hopeful melody in the background of our relationship. He'd always spoken of someday with a wistful look in his eyes, a someday filled with the chaotic joy of children. That someday had just crashed into my present, and despite a tremor of anxiety, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated excitement. The anxiety, I admitted to myself, was a recent development. The last few months had been strained. A series of small, almost imperceptible shifts had created a subtle distance between us. Bradley had been working late more often than not, his explanations vague and laced with a weariness that seemed to go deeper than just professional stress. He'd become guarded about his finances, conversations about money that were once transparent and collaborative now ending in clipped, defensive remarks. A part of me, the hopeful, optimistic part, whispered that this baby, our baby, would be the glue we needed. It would be the thing that pulled us back from the precipice of this strange, new distance and reminded us of the love that had brought us together in the first place. I couldn't wait another minute. The urge to tell him, to share this monumental secret, was a physical force. I gathered my things, my mind a blur of happy scenarios. I would leave work early, a rare treat. He worked from home on Thursdays, a small blessing of his freelance graphic design career. I imagined his face, the initial shock melting into dawning realization, then pure joy. The image was so vivid, so perfect, that I almost picked up the phone right there in the car, the engine humming impatiently. But no, this was news that deserved to be delivered in person, a moment to be cherished and etched into our history forever. Our apartment complex had a peculiar, almost voyeuristic design. The parking lot offered a clear, unobstructed view directly into the large picture windows of our ground-floor living room. It was a quirk I'd always found slightly unsettling, but today it felt like a gift. As I pulled into my designated spot, my eyes immediately found him. Bradley was on the couch, our cozy gray sectional, his laptop perched on his knees. Relief washed over me. He was home, just as I'd hoped. I was about to kill the engine and jump out of the car, my heart soaring, when something made me pause. He wasn't working. He was on a FaceTime call, his head thrown back in a hearty laugh that was visible even through the glass. And the face on the screen, pixelated but unmistakable, belonged to Tracy. His ex. The ex he had painted as a tempest of chaos and control, the reason he had trust issues, the woman he swore he hadn't spoken to in the 4 years since their volatile breakup. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach, a stark contrast to the warmth that had been spreading through me just moments before. I couldn't hear their words, but their shared laughter was a language I didn't need translation for. It was intimate, easy, familiar. My feet felt rooted to the floor of my car. An inexplicable, primal instinct screamed at me not to go inside. Instead, I fumbled for my phone, my fingers suddenly clumsy and numb. I scrolled to his name and pressed call, my breath catching in my throat. When he answered, I forced a casual tone into my voice, telling him I was feeling a little under the weather and was leaving work early, that I'd be home in about 20 minutes. His voice was strange, tight, and flustered. He mumbled something about being in the middle of a crucial work call, a big client, and that he might still be on when I got there. The lie was so blatant, so immediate, that it stole the air from my lungs. I ended the call and drove, not home, but around the block, my mind racing to connects I didn't even know existed. I parked on a side street, hidden from view, and on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I crept back toward our apartment. I felt like a character in a cheap spy movie, my actions feeling both insane and absolutely necessary. I positioned myself beneath the living room window, tucked away in the shadows of the overgrown azalea bushes. The window was slightly ajar to let in the afternoon breeze, and now, their voices drifted out, clear and devastating. It was still Tracy on the line.
And Bradley was talking about me.
He was telling her how I was getting so serious, how I was starting to pressure him about marriage, a conversation we'd had exactly once, a light-hearted chat over 6 months ago. Then Tracy's tinny voice asked a question I couldn't quite make out, and Bradley's response landed like a physical blow. "She's so stupid and desperate," he said, the casual cruelty in his tone making me flinch. "She believes everything I say. I'm just using her for her money until you take me back. She's pathetic. Actually thinks we'll get married." And then they both laughed. A shared, mocking sound that vibrated through the glass and seemed to shatter something inside of me. The world went silent again, the roaring in my ears drowning out everything but the echo of his words. Using me.
For my money.
Since Bradley had lost his corporate job last year, I had become our sole financial pillar. His freelancing was sporadic at best, and I had happily, lovingly picked up the slack, believing I was supporting him through a rough patch. I paid the rent. I bought the groceries. I made his car payment every single month. I even funded the entire vacation we took to Florida to visit his parents, a trip he'd claimed was essential for his mental health. All of it, every dollar, had been a lie. Tracy said something else, and his voice dropped, becoming conspiratorial, intimate.
"Yeah, babe.
"I know. Just a few more months, and I'll have enough saved. She has no idea I've been putting money aside. Thinks I'm broke." I felt a violent urge to vomit, to scream, to shatter the window and expose the rot that had been festering in the heart of my life. 3 years. 3 years of my love, my support, my life. All a calculated performance for a man who saw me as nothing more than a temporary bank account. And I was pregnant with his child. A wave of ice-cold clarity washed over me, extinguishing the fire of my initial rage. I couldn't let him know.
Not yet.
With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I smoothed down my shirt, took a series of deep, shuddering breaths, and walked back to my car. I drove for exactly 15 minutes, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the positive pregnancy test feeling like a lead weight in my purse. Then I pulled back into our parking spot, walked to our front door, and turned the key as if it were any other day. I plastered a bright, welcoming smile on my face as I walked in. He was still on the couch, his laptop now displaying a generic spreadsheet. I kissed him hello, my lips feeling like foreign objects against his skin. I asked about his day, and he spun a detailed, elaborate lie about a stressful work call with a demanding client. He asked why I was home early, and I told him I wasn't feeling well, which was the truest thing I had ever said. I felt physically ill, a sickness that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with betrayal. That night was a masterclass in deception. He was the perfect, attentive boyfriend, and I was the loving, unsuspecting girlfriend. He suggested takeout, and I agreed, paying for it with my credit card without a second thought, the transaction now feeling like a bitter joke. The next morning, as he stood in the shower, the steam and the sound of running water providing cover, I began my investigation. I started with our joint bank account. The numbers on the screen were stark and unforgiving. In the last 12 months, my deposits totaled over $45,000. His contributions? 0. A perfect, round, insulting 0. Then I picked up his phone. His password, ironically, was my birthday. The casual intimacy of it was another small, cruel twist of the knife. I opened his messages, and there it was. A river of correspondence with Tracy. Hundreds, maybe thousands of messages stretching back for months. They weren't just talking, they were planning. Planning his escape. He was going to move back to her city, start a new life with her, funded by me. He'd been sending her money, my money, in small, untraceable transfers. I dug deeper, a digital archaeologist unearthing the ruins of my life. I found a folder of screenshots. He had been screen capturing conversations with my own friends, casual chats where he'd skillfully pumped them for information about my finances, asking if I was up for a promotion, if I'd mentioned my quarterly bonus. He was studying me like a stock portfolio, calculating the best time to cash out. And then I found the secret bank account, an account in his name only. The balance made my breath catch in my chest. Nearly $30,000. Money he'd siphoned off, claiming it was for bills, for online courses to boost his freelance career, for a new computer he desperately needed for work. The lies were so intricate, so layered, that I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. I read their messages to each other, each word a fresh wound. He complained about my boring lovemaking, about how he couldn't wait to be with a real woman again. He detailed his plan to her. He was only with me for the financial security, while he got back on his feet. There were photos, too. Intimate, explicit photos they had been sending to each other while I was at my desk, working 60-hour weeks to keep our life afloat. My first instinct was to storm into the bathroom, to throw the phone at his head, to unleash the hurricane of rage and pain that was building inside me. But then, a colder, more calculating thought took hold. If I confronted him now, he would just leave. He would take the $30,000, run back to Tracy, and they would spend the rest of their lives laughing at the stupid, desperate woman who had funded their reunion. Even worse, if he knew about the baby, he might see it as another opportunity. He could pretend to be remorseful, promise to change, and trap me in a web of financial obligation for the next 18 years.
No.
I would not be his victim. I would not be his fool. He thought I was a doormat, a pathetic, lovesick girl he could use and discard. He had no idea who he was dealing with. My grief was quickly calcifying into a diamond-hard resolve. He had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. The next 2 days were a blur of compartmentalization. I moved through our apartment like a ghost, a polite, smiling automaton, while my mind worked with a furious, cold precision. Bradley, wrapped up in the bliss of his own deceit, noticed nothing. He was too busy sneaking texts to Tracy when he thought I was in the other room, too busy finalizing the details of their future built on the foundation of my hard work and my broken heart. My first move was to secure my assets. During my lunch break, I went to a bank I had never used before, a small credit union across town. I opened a new checking and savings account under my name only. I arranged for my direct deposit to be rerouted there, and I transferred the bulk of my existing savings, leaving just enough in our now mockingly named joint account to avoid raising any red flags. I changed every single one of my online passwords, from my bank accounts to my social media, and set up alerts for any transaction over $100. Then, I became a meticulous archivist of his betrayal. I documented everything. I took pictures of his secret bank account statements with my own phone. I used a screen recording app to capture their text conversations. When I pretended to take a long shower, I would leave my phone hidden in the bedroom, recording his hushed, conspiratorial phone calls with her. The evidence I compiled was damning. I found credit card receipts for gifts he'd bought for Tracy, a designer handbag, a delicate gold necklace, while simultaneously telling me we needed to switch to the store brand cereal to save a few dollars. With every new piece of evidence, my resolve hardened. Every wave of morning sickness, every pang of exhaustion, was a reminder that I was no longer just fighting for myself. I had a tiny, innocent life to protect from this parasite. I called my oldest friend, Freya. We had been inseparable since kindergarten, our bond forged in scraped knees and shared secrets. I didn't tell her everything on the phone. The story felt too monstrous to be spoken aloud just yet, but I told her that Bradley and I were on the rocks, that things were serious, and that I might need a place to crash for a while. Without a single question, she said, "My spare room is always yours. Just say the word." Next, I called my brother, Sam. He was my protector, my fiercely loyal older brother, and I knew that if I told him the full story, he would be at my door in an hour, ready to commit a felony on my behalf. So, I tempered the truth. I told him I was doing a massive reorganization of the apartment and needed help moving some heavy boxes into a storage unit that weekend. He, like Freya, agreed without hesitation, promising to bring his truck on Saturday. Bradley, in his arrogance, was starting to sense a shift. He kept asking why I was being so weird and distant. The sheer audacity of the question was almost comical. Here was a man who had been living a double life for a year, stealing from me, mocking me, planning to abandon me, and he had the nerve to question my mood after 2 days of quiet plotting. I wanted to laugh in his face, to scream the truth until my throat was raw. Instead, I calmly blamed it on stress at work and debilitating period cramps. As expected, his concern evaporated instantly. My problems, unless they directly impacted his comfort or his wallet, were of no interest to him. Friday night, I told him I was going out for drinks with some colleagues from work. The look of relief on his face was palpable. He was clearly thrilled to have the apartment to himself, to be able to talk to Tracy without having to whisper or hide in another room. But I wasn't going out. I drove my car down to the underground parking garage of our complex, found a spot with a decent signal, and opened my laptop. I connected to the building's public Wi-Fi and pulled up the live feed from the small security camera we had installed in our living room last year after a neighbor was burglarized. It was another household task that I had managed, and he had long since forgotten it even existed. Sure enough, less than 20 minutes after I had left, he was on the couch, his phone propped up against a cushion, deep in conversation with Tracy. I plugged in my headphones and cranked up the volume. He was telling her that he was worried I suspected something, that I was acting strange. Tracy's voice, small but crystal clear, was chillingly practical. Just stick to the plan, she urged him. 3 more weeks. You get the bonus money, and then you're on a plane back to me. My bonus. My quarterly performance bonus. The bonus I had been working myself to the point of exhaustion to earn, the money that was finally going to allow me to pay off the last of my student loans. That was the final prize he was waiting for before he disappeared. He whined that he missed her, that it was so hard pretending to be in love with me, that I was being so clingy lately. Clingy? I had barely touched him in months, recoiling from his feigned affection, which I now understood was just part of the performance. They talked for over an hour, their conversation a sickening tapestry of my stolen money and my shattered future. They planned trips to Europe, laughed about how stupidly trusting I was. At one point, Tracy even suggested he should try to guilt me into buying him a new, top-of-the-line laptop as a parting gift. As they laughed, I saw a flicker of something in her expression when he wasn't looking directly at the camera, a cold, calculating look that made me wonder if she was playing her own game. But then it was gone, replaced by the adoring smile she wore for him. I had heard enough. I had more than enough. It was time to stop planning and start acting. Saturday morning, I told Bradley I had to go into the office for a few hours to catch up on a project. Instead, I drove to the law office of Angelina Russo. A colleague had used her during a particularly nasty divorce and had sung her praises. Angelina was sharp, empathetic, and radiated a no-nonsense confidence that immediately put me at ease. I laid out the whole story, my voice steady as I detailed the financial theft, the emotional manipulation, and, finally, the undisclosed pregnancy. She listened without interruption, her expression hardening with each new revelation. Financially, she said when I was done, you have an incredibly strong case for fraud. He misrepresented his intentions for the sole purpose of securing financial support from you. The texts and recordings are your smoking gun. They prove premeditation. She explained that we could likely recover the money he had stolen and hidden, though it would be a legal battle. When I asked about the baby, her voice softened. Legally, she said gently, you are under no obligation to inform him of the pregnancy at this stage. After the child is born, he could petition for paternity, but given the documented fraud and emotional abuse, we can fight to severely limit his involvement, if that's what you choose. I nodded, a massive weight lifting from my shoulders. We spent the next hour mapping out a strategy, restraining orders, changing the locks, and the legal process for having him formally removed from our lease agreement. I paid her retainer from my new, secret bank account, feeling for the first time in days a glimmer of control. That afternoon, Sam arrived with his truck, just as he'd promised. Bradley watched, a confused frown on his face, as Sam and I began carrying sealed, neatly labeled boxes out of the apartment. Just reorganizing, like I said. I chirped, my voice a symphony of false cheerfulness. Making some space for the future. What he didn't know was that those boxes contained everything that was irreplaceable and solely mine. My important documents, birth certificate, passport, social security card. My grandmother's jewelry. My college diplomas. Every photo album from my childhood. Anything of value that he could potentially sell or destroy in a fit of rage when the truth finally came out. Sam was quiet, but his eyes were sharp. He knew this was more than just spring cleaning in the fall. As he was leaving, he pulled me into a tight hug. Whatever is going on, he whispered into my hair, you're not alone. You call me the second you need me. I fought back tears, my carefully constructed dam of composure threatening to break. I almost told him everything right there, but I held back. Not yet. Almost time. Sunday morning, under the guise of a brunch date with Freya, I had a meeting with the manager of my new bank. Armed with a folder of evidence, Printouts of the texts where Bradley explicitly stated his plan to use me for money. I explained the situation. The manager was horrified. He immediately flagged my accounts with the highest level of security and began the process of disputing several large transfers Bradley had made from our joint account to his secret one, transfers he had claimed were for shared expenses. When I got home, Bradley was still asleep, his phone clutched to his chest like a holy relic. I carefully slipped it from his grasp. New messages from Tracy. They were looking at flights. Once you get her bonus, you can book the flight for the 18th. One text read, "She'll never know what hit her." I took screenshots of everything, emailed them to myself and to Angelina, and placed the phone back in his hand exactly as I had found it. On Monday, I called in sick to work. The moment Bradley left for what he called a networking lunch, which his phone's location sharing revealed was a coffee shop right next to Tracy's apartment complex, I went to the bank. I withdrew $25,000 from our joint savings account, a significant but not total depletion, and transferred it to my secure account. That evening, Bradley came home glowing. He was overly affectionate, trying to kiss me, to hug me, his happiness so transparently false it made my skin crawl. He launched into a series of elaborate lies about the influential people he had met, the promising job leads he had secured. I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the proud, supportive girlfriend. Then I dropped my own bombshell. I told him I had some good news. I reminded him of the small, separate savings account I had been contributing to for a down payment on a house, a long-term dream of ours. His eyes lit up with a raw, naked greed that was almost breathtaking. He had forgotten about that account, so focused on the imminent prize of my bonus. "Well," I said, letting the suspense build, "I think we're finally in a position to start looking. I got pre-approved for a mortgage." He was ecstatic. He pulled me into a hug, his mind no doubt racing, calculating how much more he could extract from me before he vanished. He insisted we had to celebrate, and I readily agreed, telling him I would make a reservation for us at a very special restaurant that weekend. While he showered, high on the prospect of even more of my money, I quietly packed a small overnight bag. Later that night, I told him I had to go back to the office to finish up a presentation. He didn't question it. I drove straight to Freya's. The moment her door closed behind me, my composure finally shattered. I collapsed into her arms and told her everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and rage. I showed her the texts, the bank statements, the photos. I watched her face morph from shock to disbelief to a fierce, protective fury that matched my own. That night, I slept in her spare room, my phone turned off, letting him wonder, letting him worry, for the first time in our relationship. The next morning, I woke to 6 missed calls and over a dozen texts, each one more frantic than the last. I replied with a single, breezy message. "So sorry. Fell asleep at Freya's after our girls' night went late. Totally lost track of time. See you after work." At the office, I met with my boss, Dave. I explained, in vague terms, that I was dealing with a difficult personal situation and might need some flexibility over the next few weeks. He was a good man and, seeing the strain on my face, he simply nodded and said to take whatever time I needed. The rest of the week was a surreal performance. Bradley was the model boyfriend, attentive, charming, loving. He brought me coffee in bed, offered back rubs, listened with feigned interest as I talked about my day. Every kind word felt like an insult, every touch a violation. But I played along, letting him believe his charade was working, that I was the same naive, trusting woman he had been conning for 3 years. Friday night, while he was in the bathroom, I packed another, larger bag. "Just getting rid of some old clothes," I said brightly when he saw me. "Need to make room for all the new furniture we'll need for the house." He beamed, even helping me carry the bags to my car, the perfect accomplice in his own demise. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the man who had destroyed my life snoring softly beside me. His arm was thrown possessively across my waist, and I carefully, disgustedly, slipped out from under it. I stood in the darkness of our living room, looking at the life I had built, the life I had paid for, and I felt a profound sense of peace. It was almost over. Saturday finally arrived. The day of reckoning. He spent an hour getting ready, preening in front of the mirror like a man about to claim a great prize. I wore a simple black dress and a pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. I needed her strength with me today. The drive to the restaurant was a study in surrealism. He chattered excitedly about the features he wanted in our future house: a big yard for a dog, a game room, a home office for his booming career. I smiled and nodded, my mind a calm, quiet checklist of the final preparations. The restaurant was elegant and expensive, the kind of place he always claimed we couldn't afford. His eyes widened at the menu prices. "Order whatever you want," I said, my voice dripping with magnanimity. "Tonight, we celebrate our future." He didn't need to be told twice. He ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, a top-shelf cocktail, multiple appetizers. He was running up a tab that, under any other circumstances, would have given me a panic attack. Tonight, it just made me want to laugh. One last supper on me. As we waited for dessert, I excused myself. In the restroom, I took a deep breath and checked my phone. A single text from Freya confirmed everything was in place. It was time. I returned to the table, a serene smile on my face. Bradley was typing furiously on his phone, no doubt giving Tracy a play-by-play of his good fortune. He quickly shoved it away when he saw me, the picture of innocence. A waiter arrived with 2 glasses of champagne that I had pre-ordered. Bradley beamed, raising his glass. "To us," he said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "To our future." I raised my glass of water. "I have a toast I'd like to make, too," I said, my voice soft but clear. His smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "To new beginnings," I said, locking my gaze with his. "And to the truth." I reached into my purse, took out my phone and placed it on the table between us, screen up. I pressed play. His own voice filled the elegant silence of the restaurant, a recording from our living room security camera. "She's so stupid and desperate. She believes everything I say. I'm just using her for her money until you take me back." I watched the color drain from his face. I watched his expression cycle through confusion, then dawning horror, then pure, cornered animal panic. I watched him realize, in that single, devastating moment, that it was all over. The lies, the theft, the future he had so carefully planned with my money. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw the real Bradley, a small, pathetic man caught in a trap of his own making. The fallout from that moment has been a whirlwind, and honestly, I'm still processing it all. The man I thought I knew simply evaporated, replaced by a desperate, sputtering stranger. His face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock giving way to a frantic, calculating look as his mind raced, searching for an escape route, a new lie that could somehow fix this. He started to stammer, something about context, about me not understanding, but I just held up a hand, a silent, commanding gesture that stopped him cold. "I have hours of recordings, Bradley," I said, my voice dangerously quiet amidst the clinking glasses and muted conversations around us. "I have hundreds of screenshots. I know about the $30,000 in your secret account. I know everything." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the muscle in his jaw twitching. "Baby, it's not what you think," he pleaded, the term of endearment now a grotesque parody. "Tracy was just joking around. She's been trying to get me back for years, and I was just playing along to let her down easy." The sheer, unmitigated gall of the lie was so astounding I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Playing along? Was that what you were doing when you transferred thousands of dollars of my money to her? When you bought her a $2,000 bracelet while telling me we couldn't afford to get the brakes on my car fixed? When you were booking flights to her city for the week after my bonus was supposed to come through?" His eyes darted around the restaurant, his panic escalating as he realized this wasn't a private argument anymore. "Let's just go home," he hissed. "We can talk about this like adults." I gave him a slow, pitying smile. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said. "And it's not your home anymore. As of this morning, your name has been legally removed from the lease. Your things are packed in boxes at Dave's place." His mouth fell open. "You can't do that. It's our apartment." "No," I corrected him, my voice like ice. "My name is on the lease. My money pays the rent. It is my apartment. You are just a guest who massively overstayed his welcome." He tried a new tactic. Indignation. "This is insane. You're overreacting to a stupid joke." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were pristine printouts of everything, his secret bank statements, the records of his transfers to Tracy, the screenshots of their most damning conversations. He flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each one. "You are spying on me," he accused, his voice rising. "That's illegal." I almost laughed again. "Are you, the man who systematically defrauded me of over $45,000, Really trying to lecture me on legality? I never stole anything, he snapped back. You gave me that money. You offered to support me. And what about the lies? I pressed, relentless. What about calling me stupid and pathetic to your ex-girlfriend while you planned to bleed me dry and then disappear? He shrugged, the performance finally dropping away to reveal the ugly truth beneath. People say things they don't mean when they're venting. Everyone does it. Is that what you were doing when you were sending her my money for her rent? I asked. Or when you were buying her gifts with my credit card? What is it that you want from me? He finally asked, his voice laced with venom. Do you want money? An apology? I want you gone, I said simply. Out of my apartment, out of my bank accounts, out of my life. He sneered. And what if I refuse? I slid another document across the table. It was a letter from Angelina, outlining the fraud charges we were prepared to file. Then my lawyer files this on Monday morning, I explained calmly. The police will get involved. And instead of just being a broke, homeless loser, you'll be a broke, homeless loser in a jail cell. He scanned the letter, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. You won't do it, he said, trying to sound confident. Try me. A long, tense silence stretched between us. Finally, he threw his napkin on the table. Fine, he spat. I'll get my stuff and go. But you're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, Bradley, I replied, standing up. My biggest mistake was ever trusting you. He reached for my hand, a last, desperate attempt at connection. I pulled it away as if his touch were toxic. As I walked away from the table, leaving him with the bill, he called out my name. I didn't turn back. I called Sam on the drive home, warning him that Bradley was on his way out of the restaurant and might try to come to the apartment. Sam assured me that he and Freya were there, holding down the fort. When I walked through my own front door, the sense of relief was so overwhelming it almost brought me to my knees. Sam and Freya were on the couch, a bottle of wine open between them. Freya started to pour me a glass, then stopped, a look of sudden remembrance on her face. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I forgot. Sam's eyebrows shot up, a silent question passing between them. I took a deep, steadying breath. I'm pregnant, I said, the words hanging in the air. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotion. Is it his? Sam asked, his voice dangerously low. And does he know? Yes, it's his, I confirmed. And no, he doesn't. And if I have my way, he never will. That night was the beginning of the siege. Around midnight, the texts from Bradley started. At first, they were angry and threatening, full of bogus legal claims. Then they shifted to manipulative apologies, long, rambling paragraphs about how he loved me but was confused and how Tracy had pressured him. I forwarded every single one to Angelina, without responding. At 2 a.m., he showed up, pounding on the front door, screaming my name. Sam spoke to him through the closed door, his voice calm but firm, telling him to leave before we called the police. Bradley's response was to pound even harder. Freya was already on the phone with 911. He was gone by the time the officers arrived, but they took a detailed report, another piece of evidence for the restraining order. The next day, Tracy called me. I almost didn't answer, but a morbid curiosity got the better of me. She told me that Bradley was telling all of their mutual friends that I was a crazy, obsessed psycho who was making up lies to ruin his life because he had tried to break up with me. I just thought you should be prepared, she said, a strange note in her voice. He can be very convincing. Something about her tone felt off. How would you know that? I asked. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Because he did the exact same thing to me 4 years ago. He used me for my money, cheated on me, and then painted me as the psychotic one when I found out. I was stunned into silence. Her explanation was that she had been playing him all along, trying to get back the money he had stolen from her before he moved on to his next victim, me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my head spinning. Because he's dangerous when he's cornered, she said simply. And you just cornered him. He's humiliated and exposed, and that makes him unpredictable. I didn't know whether to believe her or not, but her warning proved prophetic. The harassment escalated. He showed up at Freya's apartment building after finding out I was staying there, screaming my name in the hallway until the police arrested him for public intoxication and trespassing. The temporary restraining order was granted on a Thursday. On Friday, he violated it by showing up at my office. Security intercepted him in the lobby, but not before he made a scene, screaming that I had stolen from him, that I was a liar. My boss, Dave, witnessed the entire thing, and offered to testify on my behalf. The final, cruelest blow came the following Monday. I woke up to a text from a number I didn't recognize. Congratulations on the baby. When were you planning on telling the father? My blood ran cold. The next text explained everything. Tracy told him. She said you mentioned it when you called her. The two of them had been playing a game I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I blocked both their numbers and forwarded the exchange to my lawyer. That afternoon, Angelina called with good news. The judge had granted a permanent restraining order, and based on the overwhelming evidence, the district attorney's office was considering pressing criminal charges for financial fraud. It was over. That night, lying in bed in my own apartment, a profound sense of quiet settled over me for the first time in weeks. I thought about the long road ahead, about raising this child alone, about the challenges and the fears. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt free. I was no longer a supporting character in someone else's deceptive story. I was the author of my own. Bradley thought he had broken me. He had no idea that he had just handed me back my life.